I got two POK questions, so I'll put them together. Look, today, yes, things are, there is a certain ferment happening in POK. I think you can see it in social media, you can see it on television. The analysis of it is very complex, but definitely I have no doubt in my own mind that someone living in POK is comparing their situation with someone actually living in Jammu and Kashmir and saying that, how is it that people today are actually progressing there. And they know that sense of being under occupation, of being discriminated, of being treated badly. I think clearly that any such comparison would be preying on their minds. And, the gentleman there actually asked me, POK, when would it merge? I don't know what you mean by merge, because it has been India, it is always India. So, yes. So, if you ask me, when will the occupation end? I think that's what you meant. So I actually find it very interesting. Till 370, when 370 was continuing, in our own country, actually there was not much discussion about POK. There was at one point in the 1990s, in fact, where some pressure was put on us by Western countries at that time. And then at that time, this was during Narasimha's government, Parliament actually unanimously passed a resolution on POK. But after that, actually the debate in this country, and I would say in many ways the public interest in this country receded. But when we actually moved on 370 and finally put an end to what was a temporary provision of the Constitution, which should never have continued for that long, and which was actually in a way fueling the separatism and violence and terrorism. I think people across the country today actually have become aware of the of our history, of the mistakes that were made in the past. In fact, often I go a lot to universities. People are very interested. They ask me, why did we go to UN on Kashmir? When I tell them, read the history, that, Sardar Patel had very deep reservations, but it was something that Nehru personally pushed at that time. And in fact, one of Sardar Patel's warnings on this was, because again, I come to the West in a way, he said, don't subject your interest to the judgment of other people who may have their own interest in this matter. And the West had an interest. We were going to them like a judge. The judge was party to the whole dispute. So this today, I think, is to me, a very interesting awareness in this country, an interest in this country. And usually, when once a country becomes aware and interest, then things happen. So, you have to wait and watch.
I have a two-part question. You spoke about a blind imitation of the West. Firstly, what do you define as the West? Which countries do you put in that bracket? And secondly, where do you draw the line between imitation and appreciation, since you spoke about appreciation of all cultures?
Your name, please?
Omika.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Anjula, a gynecologist. Recently, last week, I heard your speech. You were talking about POK. And in many election rallies, it's been echoed, POK ko lenge. Is it a strategy for this year, the government?
Radhya, I'm in the field of environment. I was just thinking whether I can have a little privilege to asking that what is your thoughts on how to fight the enemies within, especially when we are having a problem of tremendous demographic change in India?
Kaushik Das, a New Delhi-based journalist with a special interest in global geopolitics. I have two specific questions. Recently, the Indian media reported that Pakistan occupied Kashmir wanted to merge with India. What is your take about it? And we have two friends, Russia and US. Now, Russia has accused the US of influencing the Indian election. What is your view? Thank you.
Dr. Jaisankar, it was actually the acknowledgement of the world when we had this, the strength of this country was acknowledged when the G20 presidency brought us huge world's trust, global trust. And on the backdrop of that, one thing which is eluding us for a long time, that is a chair in Security Council. What do you think are the possibilities in your future? That's my question.
So I'll do one round. Let me start with the young lady there. You asked me who do I mean by the West. See, we use the West as a broad group, basically like North America and Europe. I mean, even I accept within the West, not all countries or all governments or all views are the same. But I would still say that there is nevertheless a certain cultural, ideological, historical kind of thinking there, which comes from that period of colonial domination, then the post-Second World War, you know, the Western Bloc's position. And if you actually look at you can say the rules of the world, how the world works, lot of the institutions, lot of the practices, you know, who's right, who's wrong, these kinds of things, they tend to dominate the debate. So often what they do is they will be very selective, you know. They will suddenly, you know, come to us and say, you know, you are India, you are a democracy, how can you support another country which is not democratic, taking action against a democracy? Now, I am India, you know, I had a non-democracy to my left and one to my right and one to my north, and I found the West was busy when it suited them. So what happens when you control the narrative? You know, you actually are able to create a certain impression in the minds of other people. The reality may be otherwise. I'll give you a very good example from Ramayana. You know, Ravan had created this impression that he was undefeatable. In fact, people said that, you know, his only one weakness was when he had to take the boon, he named all the categories, he didn't name men, humans, and that was why, you know, Lord Rama was born in a human form. But the fact was actually, if you look, Ravan was defeated. Vali defeated Ravan. I mean, when Angad went to meet Ravan, and Ravan was not nice to him, Angad actually reminded him saying, look, my father actually tied you up. So, or there was another king called Kartavirya Arjun of Mahishmati who defeated Ravan. But in narrative, inconvenient facts, no, you kind of know how to get rid of it. You clean it up. And then you create this very useful, neat, simple, deployable viewpoint. And how you condition and influence other people. I got two POK questions, so I'll put them together. Look, today, yes, there is a certain ferment happening in POK. I think you can see it in social media, you can see it on television. The analysis of it is very complex, but definitely I have no doubt in my own mind that someone living in POK is comparing their situation with someone actually living in Jammu and Kashmir and saying that, how is it that people today are actually progressing there. And they know that sense of being under occupation, of being discriminated, of being treated badly. I think clearly that any such comparison would be preying on their minds. And the gentleman there actually asked me, POK, when would it merge? I don't know what you mean by merge, because it has been India, it is always India. So yes, so if you ask me when will the occupation end, I think that's what you meant. So I actually find it very interesting. Till 370, when 370 was continuing, in our own country, actually there was not much discussion about POK. There was at one point in the 1990s, in fact, where some pressure was put on us by Western countries at that time. And then at that time, this was during Narasimha Rao's government, Parliament actually unanimously passed a resolution on POK. But after that, actually the debate in this country, and I would say in many ways the public interest in this country receded. But when we actually moved on 370 and finally put an end to what was a temporary provision of the Constitution, which should never have continued for that long, and which was actually in a way fueling the separatism and violence and terrorism. I think people across the country today actually have become aware of the of our history, of the mistakes that were made in the past. In fact, often I go a lot to universities. People are very interested. They ask me, why did we go to UN on Kashmir? When I tell them, read the history, that, Sardar Patel had very deep reservations, but it was something that Nehru personally pushed at that time. And in fact, one of Sardar Patel's warnings on this was, because again, I come to the West in a way, he said, don't subject your interest to the judgment of other people who may have their own interest in this matter. And the West had an interest. We were going to them like a judge. The judge was party to the whole dispute. So this today, I think, is to me, a very interesting awareness in this country, an interest in this country. And usually, when once a country becomes aware and interest, then things happen. So you have to wait and watch. Now, the whole issue of, I think, demographic change issue. Look, we are a country, we need today, if we are talking of good governance, if we are talking of being a modern state, the basic obligation of the state is to protect its borders. Leaving your borders unguarded, open for people to come, this is not democracy and freedom. It is, at the very least, incompetence, probably vote bank. That, we are today, we've allowed things to happen in this country whose consequences are really serious. And when we actually today try to rectify it through good governance, to me, as a country, I am entitled to fence my border. It is my right to decide who will come into my country and not who my people from my neighbors, they cannot choose, and it's certainly not their right to decide to come into my country. And we actually mix it up with as though we are putting some unreasonable restriction. And, stopping a foreigner coming into the country is not discrimination. It is actually a basic obligation to your own people. Each one of you will do it for your own house. I mean, would you allow your house to be entered by a stranger and give a few rooms of your house to someone you don't know? You will never do that. And yet you expect, you don't expect, but some people expect the country to do that. So I think today we need, 370 is one example today, protecting our borders is one. There are a whole lot of issues where we need to correct the mistakes of the past. And one of the ways of progressing is to be honest about it, to debate it, to look at because every country will make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. But a smart country will correct those mistakes. And in different ways, that is what we are trying to do. On this Russia-US, look, they have their arguments but I am very confident of one thing in this country. I think people of this country are confident, they are assured, they are sensible. Our electoral system is very robust. Our electoral commission today is very strong. I don't really accept that others will be able to influence the outcome of this. I think people will try. They will try. But I'm very confident that they will not succeed. And the last question on the UN Security Council. Again, that also there is a history. I don't want to go into it, then it sounds like I'm complaining too much. But I do want to say this, that for many years, what is a general feeling in the world is being blocked by a few countries. And what they are doing is, they're not allowing it to actually come up. Sometimes, case ko up, you don't allow it to come to court. So that is one way of dealing with a problem. So they're not allowing this issue actually to be debated with a record, see what happens normally if something important is being debated, there's normally a draft, people make amendments, then there's a discussion, there's a vote. All that has been delayed or blocked for many, many years. But I do sense today that there is a change in the world, that there is a very powerful sentiment for change. I think when people today look, they look at what is happening in West Asia, Middle East, what is happening in Ukraine, they see that big, we speak about a global organization. The most populous country is not there. There's no African country. There's no Latin American country. The UN was invented when there were roughly 50 independent countries. The original membership of UN was about 50. Today it is almost 200. So imagine, any organization or enterprise or a company, if the shareholders had gone up by 4 times, 3 times, would the organization not change? And yet, that is this. So I feel the pressure will mount. I'm very confident. I can see some signs of it already. So I think it's something I'm very hopeful.
One last...
so much. Dr. Jaisankar sir, I would like to approach, the question that pertains to the elephant in the room. We are sitting here in Kolkata, and there have been a number of discourses about the situation across the border on the western side. Whereas we are here on the eastern border, and we are ongoingly facing a marked demographic change, which I think Dr. Dipankar was also, pointing to. It has come to us through, various propaganda that maybe the center is scared of approaching the condition that lies on in this eastern state, for the simple reason that the situation here might be even more complicated than the one in Jammu and Kashmir. Any comments on that?
Okay, one last.
It was wonderful listening to you, Dr. Jaisankar. I'm a proponent of corporate governance and good governance. And in this context, the 2013 Companies Act put as a duty of a director that they must work in the interest of the company. Now, when people get to the helm of affairs of the country, whichever side of the table they are sitting on, isn't it a duty to uphold the interest of the country and not denigrate the country? Can we do something about it?
A very quick one, sir.
Duty of the country and not, what is it? Not
And denigrate the country.
A very last.
India entered into a deal with Iran to develop a port there, and following that, they've almost threatened that India should be ready to face consequences. Your comment on that? Thank you.
So let me respond to the first question. I don't think it's the elephant in the room. Look, the situations are very dissimilar. I would not compare what had happened for many, many decades in Jammu and Kashmir with the challenges which this part of India and the challenges which we face on the eastern border. But I would say this: if you look at the record of the Modi government, you can say many things about it, but you cannot accuse it of being scared. I think we do say one thing, even in a manifesto, this time in the manifesto we have said some things. We really mean what we say. We give a lot of thought to what we put, what we promise. It is not something that is casually done. And I would, in a way, answer your question by saying that when it comes to the security of the country, when it comes, as I said, it is not just my personal belief. I mean, all of us in the government believe today that protecting our external boundaries is a basic duty of that country. And today, good governance has many implications. And good governance also includes knowing who your citizens are. So I think these are responsibilities of a country, and I think I'm very confident that Modi Sarkar will do its duty in regard to all of this. Yes, I'm not entirely sure I follow your point, but I totally agree with you. To me, anybody who's in government should not denigrate the country, should not denigrate the government. It is in a way, a responsibility, or I would even say a privilege that the person who's in that position has been given. So I really see, I cannot be of a different opinion than to say that nobody should really badmouth the country at home or abroad. And one of the things which trouble me sometimes is, we have our politics and differences and discussions inside the country. But when I do occasionally see people go out and say in this country things are breaking down, democracy is in danger, institutions are falling apart, and actually almost say, why don't you come and, help us fix it. These things trouble me because I do, there are some things which, like you would do in a family, some things stay at home and some things maybe are more legitimately discussed outside. I think it's important to be respectful of that. And the last question, the Iran issue, we've had a long association with the Chabahar port, but this was, we could never sign a long-term agreement, and the reason was there were various problems in the Iranian end, who was our partner, JV, it's a JV. So, in a joint venture, the partner changed, conditions changed. So, finally, we were able to sort this out, and we were able to actually get the long-term agreement done. And the long-term agreement is necessary, because without it, you cannot really improve the port operations. And the port operations, we believe, will benefit the entire region. So, I did see some remarks which were made, but I think it's a question of, communicating and convincing and, getting people to understand that this is actually for everybody's benefit. I don't think people should take a narrow view of it, and they have not done so in the past. So if you look at even US's own attitude to Chabahar in the past, the US has been appreciative of the fact that Chabahar has a larger relevance. So, we will work at it.
ஏழை குழந்தைகளின் அடிப்படை கல்விக்காக உதவ singleteacherschools.org இணையதளத்தை தொடர்பு கொள்ளுங்கள்.